Hello, everyone, and welcome to the HealthyXSundays podcast, where we bring you the most critical and actionable content in the nutrition and fitness space. Dave from Mind Muscle Pro and I, Kunal Jain, also known as Veg Diet Coach, are your hosts. We are thrilled to welcome Dr. Andreas Eenfeldt, a leading authority in nutritional science and the founder and CEO of DietDoctor and Hava App. Dr. Eenfeldt is a Swedish medical doctor specializing in family medicine. He has established himself as a prominent voice in the health community, authoring Sweden's largest health blog and a best selling book on nutrition, which has been translated into 8 languages. In addition to his work with Diet Doctor and Hava, Dr. Infeld serves on the board of the Dietary Science Foundation, a nonprofit organization aimed at advancing scientific understanding of nutrition. Please join us in welcoming Dr. Andreas. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you. Great to be on. Thanks for having me.
So, you are one of the biggest names in the field of low carb nutrition, and you developed the largest low carb resource through Diet Doctor. So, what motivated you to move from a low carb approach to the satiety per calorie model?
Right. Well, I think it's important to always keep learning, right? And evolving and trying to find better ways to serve people, better ways to make it simple to eat better for more people. I think you know, as most people know, that low carb diets can be quite effective and that they can also sometimes be challenging to maintain for a lifetime, at least strict low carb with, let's say, less than 20 grams of carbs a day or something like that. Can be challenging. Most people tend to stop doing that eventually. And there's also another factor, which is that there are other diets that can also work. There are groups of people doing very different things, getting great results that are not really explained by the low carb theory. So I've more and more realized over the years, and I've been doing this for quite some time, like 20 plus years, but more and more realized that low carb is like a subset. It's like a one way to do things, but it's not the one and only way. There are many options. And for me, it's extremely interesting to think about what are the things that unite all these different approaches, whether low carb or low fat, whether mostly animal foods or mostly plant-based foods. It can all work. What are the commonalities? What are the things that govern how well a diet, if you will, or a lifestyle works, no matter which approach you choose? So that's where I'm coming from. That's what fascinates me.
Right. So, were there any particular drawbacks you found with the low carb approach?
I mean, there are many good things about low carb. One is it tends to be quite effective for people. Another is that it's very, very simple to explain. It's don't eat carbs. That's quick. That's easy to explain. Another thing that's good about it is it does have some special properties. Like if you go on a very low carb diet, then you tend to lose your glycogen, your sugar stores in the body, and with that also disappears a few pounds of water weight. So you instantly, in like 2 days, 3 days, you step on the scale and you see, wow, I lost 3 pounds, 4 pounds, 5 pounds. It's like, wow, this is magic. I'm going to be thin in no time. And of course, after that, it slows down. But it's very good for people's motivation. And I think that's one of the things that makes it kind of viral and makes people stick to it. Because if you go off it in 2 days, that water weight comes back, right? And it's like, oh, yep. Now I have to go back on the low carb diet. That's all that works for me. So there is something special about it, I would argue. But when it comes to drawbacks, well, it's just challenging, I think, for many people to exclude a lot of the foods that they are used to and foods that their friends and family tends to eat and co-worker tends to eat. And yeah, it's just difficult, I think, socially to exclude all, let's say, bread and pasta and rice and whatever it may be. So yeah, to me, that's the big drawback, that a lot of people struggle to do it for a lifetime. The second drawback may be that, well, it's not necessarily a drawback, but the second thing that's really interesting to me is there are different ways to do a low-carb diet that are have different effectiveness, and it's really interesting. How can we help, or how can people who do a low-carb diet optimize it to be as effective as possible, if that's their goal? If, let's say, their goal is weight loss, or they want to reverse type 2 diabetes or high blood pressure, things like that. If they don't get all the way and they struggle, how can they break through that plateau and be more successful? That's the other thing. And I think all of this relates to how do we explain why a diet works, how it works. Because if we understand that, then we can optimize them, then we can make them easier to do, and we can make them more effective. And the common explanation for the low carb approach over the past few decades or more, I would say, is wrong, and it leads to unfortunate results. Like, people don't get the effectiveness that they could, and it becomes harder than it needs to be.
Right. So, could you tell us a bit about the study which you and Dr. Ted conducted, and like for our audience, like how was the study done, and what were the results?
Sure, absolutely. So what we have been working on for a number of years now is a model called Satiety Per Calorie, and I think it's the future of nutrition. It's basically, you can look at what has really worked when it comes to obesity medicine. And I think it's pretty clear if you ask doctors that they will say, drugs, new drugs like Ozempic, suddenly we have something that actually works. There's been many, many obesity drugs over the years. They've all been garbage, basically. They haven't been effective enough to be worthy of use even. But now we actually have something that works really well. Ozempic, semaglutide and tirzepatide, even more effective, Mounjaro or similar brand names. They are extremely effective and captures people's attention quite a lot. Obviously, a lot of people are using them. So it's really fascinating to think what are these new drugs that suddenly works, right? And it turns out they are what's called satiety hormones. So it's a hormone called GLP-1, or at least a similar molecule to that hormone. It works in the brain, and it makes the brain feel full, like you have had enough food, you are not interested in eating more. So you feel satiety. Satiety is this sense of not wanting food, of being satisfied. And then you eat way less, and then you lose a lot of weight. Problem with these drugs is, you have to stick on them for life, because as soon as you get off them, you're just gonna rebound in weight super quickly. So the question is, can we do this in a natural way? And can we find foods that give you satiety, or specifically more satiety per calorie? Because feeling full satiety doesn't really help you if you get satiety from ice cream. You can do that, eat a whole lot of ice cream and you feel satiety, great, but you also had 1,000,000 calories. Now you're going to gain weight, you're not going to lose weight. So the trick would be, can we find foods that give you more satiety for fewer calories? Then we are having the same kind of effect that these drugs do. So Ted Naiman, a US doctor, has also been passionate about this for more than 20 years. He's been really following the science for most of his adult life. I have too for decades. So we've developed this approach where instead of leaning on one dietary approach like low carb or vegan or carnivore or anything, we try to look at all the science when it comes to food intake for humans, all the best science, like randomized controlled trials. And what we do is we try to identify what are the factors that govern this, the factors that are common to all diets. And long story short, we've come up together with, consulting with world-leading authorities also, of course, we come up with 4 factors that explain a lot of the differences between food. And those are our protein percentage, the energy density of food, the fiber percentage of food, and also what we call a hedonic factor, or like the addictiveness of food. Another word is hyperpalatability, difficult word, but sometimes used. So some foods are just very, very attractive, like the ice cream I just mentioned. You can be full after a meal and still you're happy to eat some ice cream, right? Something about that combination of fat and sugar. And it turns out that there are more of these combinations. So this hedonic factor is sort of about certain combinations, fat, sugar, salt, and other things together brings this effect. So, okay, we have a bunch of factors. Problem is now it's really complex, right? We have lots of things to keep in mind. What if we make that simple? We take all that information and we make it just one number. So that's what we've done. We have an algorithm that's been modeled after all the existing best quality research that models these factors together and then ranks food based on what studies tell us. So from 0, the least satiety per calorie, meaning the foods that make you most obese, right? And then all the way up to 100, the most satiety per calorie out of all commonly available foods. And those are the foods that make you the leanest. Yeah, so we've done that, and then we have an app that's been around now for about 1 year called Hava. And what you can do there is you can log the foods you eat. Actually, you can do it with new AI technology. You just take a picture of what you eat and you get everything, the amounts of every ingredient, etc. And you can easily log it, and then you get AI feedback, what did you do that was really great, and what did you do that you could do even better. And the goal there is in the app is to get your satiety per calorie up to a good place for you, a good balanced place for you. So for example, the standard American diet, what many Western people or people in developed worlds countries eat, tends to be in the high 20s. So that's a place where actually most people tend to become overweight or obese. We know this, right? And getting it up to 50, that's kind of where we try to make this algorithm guided so that at around 50 is a balanced point, which means that if you're a normal person living a normal life, then you would tend to get a normal weight and metabolic health somewhere around 50. So getting it up to 50 is a good goal for a lot of people. But then, of course, if you're an overachiever, then maybe you want something even more effective. Let's say you have a lot of weight to lose, or you have diabetes type 2 to reverse, and you're in a hurry, then you can go higher, and it's even more effective. So you can go to 60, 70, super effective, and maybe even a little bit higher for a while. So you mentioned the research we've been doing. We have looked at the data from everybody who's been using this app now for a year. We looked at the latest a few weeks ago. We analyzed 67,000 days of eating. And what we find is that this really seems to work amazingly well, meaning that when people eat a low satiety per calorie food, let's say 20, very low, then they eat quite a lot of calories. And if they eat a very high satiety per calorie food day, let's say 80, then they eat about half. So it's almost a factor of 2, right? Let's say you eat a standard American diet, a fast food diet, and then you switch to a very high satiety per calorie diet. it seems that on average, you will cut your calories in half almost, which is insanely effective, most likely. And, it's in the same league, I would argue, that these obesity drugs are, like Ozempic, potentially even more so. It's very fascinating.
So this is basically more or less common sense. Eat high satiety, more nutrient dense food, and
Yes.
automatically your calorie intake is less.
Yeah, it's very common sense. I'm astounded that nobody else has done this. Like, I haven't seen this anywhere else. Like, why is nobody else doing this? I don't know.
All right.
But here we are.
So what does this offer as opposed to the common calorie seco method, the calorie in, calorie out approach? What is the
Mhm.
benefits?
So the benefits are that it actually affects, one step earlier. So instead of trying to eat less and sort of white knuckling it and being hungry and miserable and just suffering, instead you just make some better choices in what foods you choose. And then you can eat as much or as little as you want. We actually, in our app, we advise people to don't try to eat less. Just try to get your average score up. More nutritious foods, more of these nutritious foods, more of this food, more of that food, right? And then eat as much as you want. And the miracle, which it seems like a miracle perhaps for some people at least, is that it seems to work really well. And I mean, I'm trying it myself. I've actually logged everything I've eaten in the app for more than a year. I had it before we launched it, and I think there are two benefits. The first is that this is so easy to do, arguably, at least once you learn how to think about this. It becomes extremely easy to do, extremely flexible, fits any food preferences. So for me, I've been on a very low-carb diet for 20 years. I would just say that this is 10 times easier, at least. And my results are every bit as good when I aim for like a level of 55 perhaps is where I like to be, because then I get, can be strong and lean with some resistance training. And
Right.
and that's just very, very easy to do. And now in the last couple of weeks or since the new year, I'm doing an experiment where I'm trying to push it. I'm trying to go as high as I can reasonably do without too much effort, just to see what happens. So I'm at like 75 now, and I mean it's not as fun at 75. You don't have as much flexibility. It's not as easy, but it's not super hard. I mean, I eat as much as I want. I avoid some foods and I eat a little bit more of others. But what's fascinating to me is I instantly eat like 500 to 700 calories less per day, just like that. Boom.
Right.
Even when I start at something pretty good, I can still get more effectiveness by just pushing it a little bit. And then, when I get tired of this, which I will be, then I will go back to my happy place and be happy there.
All right. The one drawback which I can think of at least is of at least the calorie counting method is that it overlooks the content of the food. It just merely looks at food as energy, and we don't differentiate between good fats and bad fats, seed oils and healthy fats. So, how do SPC method take care of this?
Yeah, so the SPC approach, this scoring, it factors in multiple things that in together it really will, on average, push people towards more whole foods, more nutrient dense foods, like you mentioned, for sure, higher levels of protein, lower energy density, more fiber, and less hyperpalatable foods. So there are exceptions to this, which is interesting. But in general, ultra-processed foods score very low, and whole nutrient-dense foods score quite high. So if you follow this approach with the intent of raising your score, losing weight, improving your metabolic health, getting a bit leaner and stronger, then you will tend to make some good choices in that direction, I would say. Like more nutrient-dense foods, more protein, more quality foods. Yeah.
Right. So we need to be basically mindful of these small factors and go with the score.
Yeah, but and the fascinating thing to me is this lens, if you will, this approach can be used for any food preferences. So let's say you're vegan, you can absolutely go 100% vegan and follow this sort of step by step up in scores. If you're the opposite, if you're carnivore, you eat only meat, you can absolutely use it as well. If you're low carb, you can use it. If you're high carb, you can use it. If you're in between, like most people, absolutely. So it's really unique, I think, in that it doesn't force you to give up any old food groups or toss out all the food you have and buy entirely new foods and get a whole new meal plan and change everything you eat. You can start where you are and then figure out, like, what are the small changes I could do that would be most impactful? I think a lot of people kind of, without meaning to, they kind of spin their wheels in that they start doing a lot of big changes that don't really add up to much. Like they may be kind of lateral moves, if you will. Like you, for example, you could, people could get rid of a lot of carbs, but then they add a lot of fat instead. And the results could be like, not that much might happen. What if instead, if they identify, like, these are the 1, 2, 3 big things that would really make a difference in my life and that I could easily imagine doing. Like, okay, I just switch this food for that food. I eat a bit less of this and I eat more of this that I already eat and like, right? Maybe that's all you need to go from 35 to 50. And now you're going to be at a normal weight and normal health, hopefully for life, just by. So I think there's such power in identifying what are the small things, right? Like there's this 80-20 rule, you probably heard of it. Like 80% of the effect tends to come from 20% of the things you do. And then you have to do all the other 80% to get the final 20%. But maybe you're only interested in getting 80% to perfect, right? Maybe that's enough. And then if you would know what are the 20% that would fit you the best, that would be the least effort for you to get to 80% to perfect health and weight. Wouldn't that be great? I think that's what our approach could achieve for people.
Right.
Right, doctor. So, doctor, you describe type 2 diabetes as probably a case of energy toxicity. So, can you please tell us what does this mean, energy toxicity, and how can SPC help type 2 diabetics to recover?
Yeah, it's fascinating because type 2 diabetes has historically often been seen like a chronic progressive disease. If you get this disease, it's mostly genetic. It's not much you can do. Just take your drugs, and you can look forward to a lifetime of your health declining and getting heart disease and dementia and stroke and all the nasty stuff, getting blind and dialysis and all of that. Unless you take your medications diligently, and then maybe you only get half of it, right? And that's pretty miserable. So what if it wasn't a chronic progressive disease? What if you could just reverse it? What if it's due to being poisoned by the modern environment? Because your ancestors, your great-great-great-grandfather, father and mother, they didn't have type 2 diabetes, but now lots of people do, right? So
Yep.
The genes haven't changed. Something in the environment changed. There is something in our modern food environment that is poisoning us. And it's this new ultra-processed industrial food supply where, and I don't want to sound conspiratorial because I don't think this is a conspiracy. It's just capitalism. It's just how the market works. But the food industry profits when you buy foods, especially if you buy foods that have a high profit margin, right? So what they want you to do in order to increase their profit is for you to buy more of foods that are very profitable for them. And how do we do that? Well, we have to engineer the foods so you want to eat as much as possible. Because if you eat more, you will buy more. So you make it as tasty as possible and impossible to stop eating, and low in nutrition, because if it's low in nutrition, low in protein, then you will eat even more because your body needs the nutrients. You will keep eating until you get what you need, right?
Right.
So, okay, we have this food environment. It's designed by brilliant food engineers to make you eat as much as possible. And what happens if you eat as much as possible for decades? Well, you gain weight. And then you reach a point which is individual and genetic. And this is something you cannot control because you're born with it. But you have this personal fat threshold. Like, you have a genetic tendency to be able to store only so much fat in your subcutaneous fat. Like, you can only get so obese or overweight as depending on the situation. It may be a low point or a high point, but eventually, if you keep gaining weight, you reach a point where your body cannot deal with it anymore. And that means that your subcutaneous fat stores are full, and now extra fat, if you keep gaining, is going to spill over into your belly, into your visceral fat, your belly fat. And specifically, you're going to get a fatty liver. So you're going to get fat accumulating in your liver. And when that happens, then a whole lot of nasty stuff starts happening that culminates in type 2 diabetes. So first you have pre-diabetes. You get something called insulin resistance. Insulin doesn't work as well anymore. The liver starts pouring out sugar into your blood. The blood sugar starts going up. The pancreas starts producing lots of insulin to keep this elevated blood sugar down. But actually, eventually the pancreas also starts accumulating fat. And when the pancreas gets fatty, it stops functioning properly, and these insulin producing cells get kind of suffocated or sort of stop producing insulin. And now you have type 2 diabetes. Now your blood sugar is sky high. You start peeing it out. All your body starts to take damage from this, and eventually you will feel something is very wrong, and you will go to the doctor, and they will take a blood test and see, oh, your glucose is 5 times normal or something. You have type 2 diabetes, and they put you on drugs, right? That's the personal fat threshold, is the level, your personal level, where your body cannot deal with it anymore. When you have become too poisoned for too long by too much energy. And the energy is, a lot of people think it's sugar, but it's not just sugar. It's sugar and a lot of other things. It's actually all carbs and all fats. So energy toxicity from carbohydrates and fat, and to be complete, alcohol as well. But mostly it's fats and carbs. Too much for too long, driven by this new ultra-processed food environment and foods that make us eat too much. That's the, I think, reason in 99% of cases, I would guess.
Right. So you didn't mention protein as one of the reasons for toxicity. Is that the case, or even too much protein can be a problem?
Generally, protein helps. It doesn't hurt because it gives you a lot of satiety. It makes it harder to overeat. In fact, if you go on a very high protein diet, you will tend to eat less. So in theory, you would think, okay, well, it's also energy. You could get energy toxicity by eating a lot of protein, but in reality, it tends to work the other way because you feel so full, you get so satiated by protein. And this has been tested in studies. Like, there is one study from a few years back where they tested 2 groups of people with pre-diabetes. So they were sort of at their personal fat threshold, you'd think, right? They're about to go completely into energy toxicity. They were sort of borderline. Okay, one group got a high protein diet, 30% protein. One group got a more normal protein diet. And what they found after a couple of months was that the people in the high protein group, 100% of them had reversed their pre-diabetes. Like they were now normal again. And only a very small percentage of the people in the other group had achieved that. So higher protein is great for preventing and reversing type 2 diabetes.
That's very interesting.
Right. So one of the things which who are low carb enthusiasts and carnivores often say is as long as your insulin levels are low, there's no possibility of fat storage. That's the argument you can say, right? You can have all the butter in the world, but you won't gain fat. So, and we know from practice, we know this is not true. Calories
No.
does matter. So for our audience, could you just brief what is happening?
Or briefly, that's just wrong.
All right.
It's not how it works. And this is coming from someone, I mean, I was a massive believer in this carb insulin model for many, many years. I believed totally that low carb was the way to go. And now I've come to realize that low carb is just one way to do it, and there are many ways to do it. And one of the mistakes of people in the low carb movement is they say things like, if your insulin is low, you cannot store fat, so you just eat as much. That's very unhelpful. That's gonna slow people down or actually make people be less successful. So you can always store fat. If you eat fat, you can store it. If you don't have type 1 diabetes, like type 1 is your pancreas is, not working at all. You don't have insulin, right? But if you're a normal person, a person who does not have type 1, you always have insulin. You can always store fat.
Right. So coming back to the energy toxicity part, fats have 9 calories and carbs have 4 calories. So is it right for us to assume that fats are more a contributing factor to energy toxicity than carbs? And in fact, twice.
I wouldn't say that. No, I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I think the right way to look at it, or a more productive way to look at it, is to say, what's the satiety per calorie of different foods? Like how much would you eat on certain foods? Because we don't eat a certain amount of grams a day necessarily. I mean, there's some truth to that, I suppose, actually, but we don't have at least a sort of a counter of how many grams of fat or carbs we eat, right? So the real question is how much satiety per calorie do you get from certain foods? And if the fat comes together with protein in a real whole food, let's say meat or fish or egg or something like that, then it's probably great for you. Because it's got a good satiety per calorie, because protein is high, the energy density isn't too bad. Hedonically, it's probably not too bad either. But if you have pure refined fat like oil or butter, then unfortunately, low carbers don't like when I say this. Unfortunately, that has a very low satiety per calorie. And it's very easy to overeat or eat more calories by adding oil or butter to your food. So if you're looking to lose weight, you should definitely consider cutting back on that and not eating more than you need for the foods to be tasty and pleasurable.
Right. Interestingly, I happened to read a post of yours where you said there was an experiment with low fat, high carb, helping out with type 2 diabetes. And in fact, I have myself come across several cases of that sort where you are essentially in a calorie deficit with high carbs and that person gets better. I've
Yeah,
seen many
yeah,
naturopaths doing it over here. So,
yeah, absolutely true. And we see this in our data too, and there are other studies who show this as well. I haven't published it. I might publish it actually on on X today or tomorrow. But what we see in our data is very, very similar to what the other have showed before, is that as you eat fewer carbs, you tend to eat fewer calories. And when you eat more carbs, you tend to eat more calories, up to about 35 or 40%, which is where all the junk food is, right? The fast food and every ultra processed, you have a mix of carbs and fat together. 40% carbs is great to get obese. But then if you go above that, so you're eating 50, 60, 65% carbohydrates, you tend to eat less again. So you get this sort of like a pyramid, right? And you can actually go either way. Like you can go on a low carb diet and lose weight, or you can go on a high, very, very high carb diet and lose weight. And like you mentioned, there are people who do this. Like there are these whole foods, plant-based diet proponents that suggest an extremely high carb, extremely low fat diet to people, and they lose weight. They reverse their type 2 diabetes. I think it's fascinating. Like I personally don't eat like that, but it works. And whatever theory we have about obesity should be able to explain all of it, not just one side of the equation, right? We have these low carbers over here, and they explain it with insulin, and then we have these whole foods plant-based people over here, and they do the opposite, and it works, and they explain it by, well, we're avoiding these evil animal fats or animal products, and they're both doing something that works, but their explanation can only explain what they do. They can't explain what the other camp does, right? Mm-hmm. The cool thing with this SPC model, this satiety per calorie model, is, now we can explain both of them and everything else. That's pretty exciting, I think.
Right.
Because just to wrap it up, these whole foods plant-based people, these extremely low-fat, high-carb people, well, the protein level still tends to be okay over there because you're eating so little fat. You're getting protein from the plants and from beans and lentils and so forth. And then the energy density, super low, fiber contents off the charts high, very, very effective. It's not hedonic and hyperpalatable. Like the overall score tends to be quite good. And so it's not surprising. Our approach just predicts, that will work.
Right.
And it does.
Just to be clear for our audience, I think neither Dr. E or us are subscribing to the idea of low fat and high carbs. We are just saying it's one of the possibilities.
Sure. I say the same thing.
Right. So we are definitely waiting for the numbers or whatever you're publishing in the next few days. We are definitely waiting for more data. So
I mean, I can give you an exclusive if you want.
Yeah, sure.
So what our data shows, which I find super fascinating, is that I wish I wasn't sure that it would show this. Is it good to go to zero carb? Is it, lower is better on the carb scale? And it turns out, at least in our data, that the lower you go, the less you eat. Like all the way down to zero carbs. The lower you go, the less you eat. But it's still not as low as the people who go really high on the SPC scale. Like you still eat a few hundred calories more than the people who go quite high on the SPC scale. So zero carb or virtually zero carb might be something like in our data about like SPC 63. So it's like, fairly effective, but there's a long way further to go to sort of an optimal weight loss diet, which means that all these people who are on a low carb diet and then they don't quite get the results that they want, so they go even lower and even lower and even lower. They're getting stuck in a local maximum, but it's not the global maximum. Meaning they could do better in a much easier way if their goal is weight loss and diabetes reversal, etc. So I think that's pretty sad, actually, because it's hard to eat 5 grams of carbs a day is very hard. And then you're still not getting the results you could if you want to trust this data, right? And what you could do with this satiety per calorie model is instead, okay, go to a 65 or 70 SPC diet, which is, I would argue, much easier to do than 5 grams of carbs. And now you get a better result, probably. So easier and better results at the same time. That's magic, right?
Right. So I personally tried out a veg diet yesterday, and my score turned out to be 62, so which I think is pretty decent.
I mean, that's super solid, super solid. Good job, I would say. I mean, I generally end up somewhere around 55 when I'm just maintaining and just getting the results I want as in the easiest way I can.
Right.
So, the doctor, the SPC approach, is it it's good for type 2 diabetes, weight loss, etc. But other metabolic illnesses, is it useful for them? And I think I want to ask you about, like, sometimes people go for keto diets for mental health problems, etc. So does SPC fit into sort of therapeutic nutrition as well?
That's a very, very interesting question. So I think that there may be a role for ketogenic, low-carb diets for treating mental health issues like schizophrenia, bulimia, not bulimia, sorry, but bipolar and certain other things. Maybe. I mean, this is all very new, and I think there probably still needs to be quite a bit of research around this. But certainly I've heard some interesting anecdotes and some interesting preliminary studies suggesting that, hey, this could be quite effective for many people. So I think for those that can imagine eating like that and they have a healthcare professional to help guide them, I think that's a very viable option. And I don't have any specific research about this on the SPC model or sort of calorie restriction or anything else. So I wouldn't recommend this approach that we are doing here for mental health things because it just lacks data for that. I don't have any evidence that it's effective at all. So no, I wouldn't recommend it for that. And I would say a ketogenic diet might be effective and useful for that. Certainly, it's effective and useful for treating epilepsy, for example. That's been well studied for 100 years, right?
Right.
So there is something interesting about sort of ketosis and what it does to the function of the brain.
Right. So, what other aspects of health can an SPC work for, apart from weight loss and diabetes?
Yeah, I think it's massive. I think most of the top chronic diseases of the developed world are related to this. I think this is by far the biggest health problem in the world, and that if we could make it simple for people to eat better in a way that makes them want to eat less and keep it up for life, that would be utterly transformative. So it's not just obesity and diabetes, it's all of these top chronic diseases. High blood pressure is another sort of symptom of this same thing, energy toxicity, and also poor cholesterol, like dyslipidemia, like low HDL, low levels of the good cholesterol and high triglycerides, for example. And this really drives our top chronic diseases, such as heart disease. All of this is very, very powerfully impacting the risk of heart disease. So, and that's our top killer. That's the thing that kills the most people in the world before they need it to go, right?
Right.
That's number one. And all of these factors are ultra powerful in affecting the risk of heart disease. And then we have cancer, which is the second nastiest thing that kills people ahead of time. Many cancers are dramatically increased in risk if you have obesity and type 2 diabetes and so on, right?
Right.
So you have this sort of energy toxicity driving high insulin levels. This is a signal to cells in the body that there is tons of energy around and it's a good time to divide, right? And the more cells divide, the higher the risk that you eventually develop cancer decades perhaps earlier than you otherwise would have. So yeah, you can massively increase your risk of cancer or decrease it by eating foods that make you eat less. And then we have dementia, Alzheimer's, stroke. These are also super connected to this. And the list goes on and on and on. And I think that now that we have these drugs, these Ozempic-like drugs, these GLP-1 drugs, we'll start seeing research showing just how connected this is to most of the top chronic diseases that we face. So just a few weeks ago, for example, tirzepatide, this Mounjaro drug, was approved for sleep apnea. So lots of people suffer from sleep apnea. Now you can take this drug for it. Well, you can also, if you want to, eat higher satiety per calorie foods and lower your weight and get the, most likely a quite similar effect if you're able to do it, if you're able to eat like that. There's another study showing pain of arthritis drops a lot. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And we have these hormone disturbances like PCOS for women, lowering fertility, one of the main reasons for low fertility in women who are of childbearing age. This is also connected to metabolic syndrome and obesity, exceeding your personal fat threshold. So yeah, may help couples conceive, increasing fertility, and probably could help for men too to get their hormones in better balance. Like energy toxicity messes up the whole system, the whole body in various ways. And it has all kinds of side effects across the body, different organs and different functions. So I think that the implications are profound. Like the difference in overall health by staying at an ideal weight all through your life or getting energy toxicity early in life is massive. And we have studies showing this, that it can differ, 15 years in life expectancy and even more when it comes to healthy years. So it's absolutely massive.
Right. It sounds like it covers all the non-communicable diseases, the whole spectrum of it.
Probably not all, but sometimes you wonder, maybe it's a very high percentage, I would say. So if we can keep infectious disease under control and we can find a way to get rid of this problem or most of this problem across the world, imagine how healthy we would be.
Absolutely.
Be a golden age of health.
Absolutely. Wish for it. And so the next question is an audience question. Maybe the next few questions are from some of our audiences. And one is, isn't the SPC index another number-based food guideline similar to the glycemic index that ties people to numbers? Is there any difference, like comparison to glycemic index?
So I think it's profoundly more effective. I don't think the glycemic index is all that helpful. And, that's actually where I got started. So I got really into the glycemic index. I'm trying to count now, but it's probably like 23 years ago. And I found it fascinating. So very, very interesting. But the more I've learned, the more I've seen that that's somewhat helpful perhaps, but at a much, much smaller scale. because it's not just about the carbs to start with, and then certainly not all about the glycemic index, and there are so many flaws to it. We could have an entire episode about that. But one big thing is that sugar actually scores better in glycemic index than other carbohydrates, which is probably the opposite of what you want, because sugar is probably worse. It makes you eat more. It's more hedonic and has other unfortunate effects in your liver and such. So that it's probably less good. But in the glycemic index, it raises your blood glucose less, and it looks better. So even if you're focused on carbs, I would not use the glycemic index much.
Right.
And I would argue that there are better things than focusing on just carbs too.
All right.
And coming back to the original question you had, isn't it just a number? Well, it is a number, of course. And I think that in the ideal world, we wouldn't need it. Like in the ideal world, we would just eat intuitively, all of us, and eat as much or as little as we want. And I know some people propose that. And unfortunately, I think they are a little bit naive and missing the problem we have with the food environment we live in. It's like, letting kids out in the candy store and say, just eat as much or as little as you want every day. And it's not going to end great, right?
Right.
Because if you eat as much or as little as you want of any of these ultra-processed foods, then you end up in exactly the situation we're in, which is that 93% of US adults are metabolically unhealthy and on track for all of these health problems. And when you get to people at age 50 or above, it's 97%. So it means almost everybody gets sick in this food environment if we eat all of it. And we need some way of guiding us to better choices. I think that this system is the best I've seen, in that you can learn a few things. Like, you can learn out of the foods you already eat, which are scoring high and low. And then you can just eat a little bit less of the low scoring ones, eat a bit more of the high scoring ones, and maybe you're home. Very easy to do. And then once you've learned that, maybe you don't need any app or score or anything. You just learned that, oh, these foods I like, I should just eat more of them. These foods I kind of thought I should eat, they're not so great for me, I'm going to eat less of them. Maybe that's all you need. But you need something. Because if you do nothing, you're probably going to end up with a 97%.
All right. So another question we got from the audience was that satiety can be very subjective concept, right? For instance, women during their periods crave for food, or if you're in an environment where you're around food, you feel like eating more. So how does your model incorporate all this?
Yeah, great question. It is indeed subjective, and we get around that by not including any of the subjective stuff. So what we do is we look at objective evidence from studies where people have been eating various kinds of diets, and then we only go by how much they eat. Not how they feel, but how much they eat, right? And that's not subjective, that's objective. That's a number that you can measure. And then, of course, there will be differences. Like, some days you're hungry, some days you're not hungry, some days you may have an infection, or you're stressed, or you slept poorly, you're going to eat more. Yeah, that's true. But you're still going to eat even more if you choose ice cream instead of chicken breast, right? So it's still useful information. Even if you go for the ice cream, it's good to know what kind of effect it has.
Maybe AI will get us someday. Right.
And also, I think that it's really nice to be able to have an approach where you can find your balance. Like, maybe I, for example, want to have ice cream sometimes. Well, wouldn't it be great if I could eat ice cream, and as long as I'm not addicted to it, right? As long as I can stop once I start, then I may want to do that sometimes, but still stay lean and healthy because those are my goals. Then I can eat higher satiety per calorie in other meals. So I can fit in some ice cream here and there and still be lean and healthy, which I have as goals. So I think that's good.
Right. So, doctor, the next question is, can SPC index be applied across cultures, especially in India, where food types and eating habits are very diverse?
Oh, 100%. Honestly, I am not aware of any food preference that this doesn't potentially apply to. Like you can eat anything. One problem that would perhaps come up is that our app is based on a US-based food database. It does have, cuisine from around the world, but less so from non-US cultures, which means that we have some work to do to fill it up with common foods from all common food cultures. So we'll get to work on that. I think that this is such an interesting time with the AI technology coming up, and I have a strong sense that before this year is over, it's going to be possible to pretty much just import all the foods that are on the internet using AI agents. And yeah, we intend to be among the first to do that. We're actually first, as far as I know, to use modern AI for image tracking. We launched it about a year ago now. And a lot of other apps, either they don't even have it or they launched it just a month or two ago. It's like, okay, well, we had it a year ago. And we have instant AI feedback on what you eat in the app. I haven't seen that anywhere else. So I think we're number one, which is also like definitely something you should have. Although this SPC model makes it much more useful, so I'm not sure how useful you can make it in other apps, like have an AI pop up and say eat less. I don't think that's going to help so much. But apart from that, yeah, we try to be at the forefront of technology and trying to reinvent what a nutrition app is and can do.
Right.
Right. So in India, we face significant protein deficiency, and it's called protein poverty, alongside one of the highest rates of diabetes. A strict low carb diet is often impractical in this context. What practical suggestions can you offer to address these challenges in the absence of protein?
Okay, I think probably you can give better advice on that, living in that culture, right? I wouldn't presume to know as much as 10% of what you do. With that said, I'm thinking beans, lentils are amazing from a protein perspective and also from a satiety per calorie perspective. Also quite affordable in most parts of the world, I would assume. If it's possible to get it, I suppose all these soy-based products could be quite helpful as well. Tofu, seitan, well, that's gluten-based.
Gluten-based.
It could also be good. And of course, any way high protein products, protein powders, if that's affordable, then that can be helpful too.
All right. More veggies would be helpful, I assume. Fiber.
I mean, that's always helpful, but you don't get so much protein from it, I guess.
Right.
It's good for protein percentage, but the absolute amounts tend to be a bit low. You would have to eat like a mountain of vegetables to get enough protein.
Right.
Unfortunately. But beans and lentils are fantastic. I think that could be one of the big things. And soy-based products could be another. If people eat dairy, that is amazing. My favorite thing in the world when it comes to high satiety is non-fat Greek yogurt. It's like a cheat code. It's like almost too good to be true. If people want to lose weight and get strong and lean, eat Greek yogurt. Non-fat Greek yogurt is extra powerful, but any high protein yogurt is good. Non-fat high protein yogurt is off the charts. So might score a 90 in the SPC scale. That's just crazy.
Right. Hoping to see SPC scores on restaurant menu someday.
Sure, we need to work on that.
All right. I think we have one additional audience question, Kunal, in the chats.
Yeah, in the chat, there's one question that how you sum up the SPC score if you eat multiple things in different quantities. Just like how does the app work?
So that's what our app does, the Hava app. If you go to the App Store and download it, you can use it for free, the basic functionality. You can try it for free with all the extra things. So what you can do, for example, is just take a picture of what you eat and get all the ingredients, and it sums it up. And the way we calculate the SPC score, the Satiety Per Calorie score for the meal or the day, is a calorie-weighted average of all the things you eat. So that a leaf of lettuce, it's got 100 Satiety Per Calorie, but the calories are almost nothing. It doesn't have much weight. It doesn't have much impact. But let's say you eat a lot of black beans, they have a significant amount of calories and their SPC score is high, so that's gonna drag the overall daily score up quite a bit.
Right. So we have quite a few people live with us, and please unmute your mic if you have any questions.
In the meantime, I have one question, last question. So, what about stuff like artificial sweeteners? Have that been thought of?
Yeah. We actually factored that into our hedonic score, the hyperpalatability sort of penalty, so that if you combine artificial sweeteners with, especially if you combine it with high caloric fatty foods, then you get a hedonic penalty. Let's say you have, I just keep coming back to the same examples, like ice cream without sugar, but with artificial sweeteners. Well, we actually give that a hedonic penalty, sort of like sugar. But it's still going to be a step in the right direction because the protein percentage will be higher, the energy density will be lower when you take sugar and you replace it with an artificial sweetener. So I would argue, and I know this is controversial, but I would argue that if you can go from sugar sweetened to artificially sweetened, for most people, that's a great option. Much better, especially when it comes to weight loss and diabetes reversal, for sure, 100%.
Right. So it's open for audience questions. If anyone wants, please unmute your mic and you can go ahead.
Got no takers, huh?
No questions, I think, yeah.
Right. So, I think we can almost wrap it up. It was a great session. Kunal, I think you can do the honors.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Andreas, for making
it was
time for us.
fantastic. Thank you.
It was so insightful, and we are really looking forward to exploring SPC, and it looks very promising, and more people should try it out, the Hava app, and see how they improve their satiety and health with the help of the app. So we are looking forward for probably another session on the more deep dive into this in future if you would like. I think there is
Sure.
yeah. So with that, thank you so much for making time for us, Doctor.
Good
a
luck.
pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good luck with further research and good luck keeping the angry low carbers away.
No, I like the low carbs. I actually think that it's important that we all learn together
Right,
and evolve. And I think we can all do a lot of good in the future if we do that.
right, absolutely.
All right. Take care. Thank you.